Hey, Tim, it's always a pleasure to be with you, and I'm really tickled to death to find out that you're still plugging along after all this time.
Ladies and gentlemen, BOAA of America!
And now, ladies and gentlemen, BOAA of America Audio with your host, Tim Banal.
What is going on, my friends? This is Tim Banal of BanalofAmerica.com with the season premiere of BOA Audio Season 6. We are about to embark on yet another year of Banal of America Audio. We have got a slew of seriously mind-bending episodes on tap for you over the next few weeks and months, starting with this week's season premiere, featuring, of course, our good friend, Gentleman Jim Mars. Before we kick off the festivities for this year's season premiere, I want to take a moment and remember former BOA Audio guest Betty Mailer. She was, of course, the founder and president of the UFO Society of Ireland, and was featured here on BOA Audio way back in Season 4. I was just completely stunned and saddened in a big way by the passing of Betty Mailer in mid-October. Took me totally by surprise and made me think back to that episode with some fond memories. She was a one-of-a-kind character, just full of zest, really is the best way to put it. I highly encourage folks to go back and check out that edition of BOA Audio featuring the late Betty Mailer. I had so much fun talking to her. She was unforgettable. And so, of course, we want to extend our condolences and thoughts and prayers to the friends and family of Betty over there in Ireland and around the world. And we want to dedicate BOA Audio Season 6 to the late Betty Mailer. Unfortunately, we say it a lot here at the beginning of the program when we've lost a former BOA Audio guest, but it bears repeating. Let's take solace in the fact that Betty Mailer is most likely still out there somewhere in some form, and her journey continues, and she's finding out the answers to the questions we ponder here on the program all the time. So I hope she enjoys the ride wherever it leads, but she is going to be certainly missed down here as well. From that somber note, let's turn the mood around to something a little bit more celebratory as we get down to business on the reason why you're all here in the first place, talking about the season premiere of BOA Audio Season 6. You don't need me to tell you too much about the guest, because here it is, our 6th year of the program. We're, of course, talking to the man who has become synonymous with each new season of the program, the venerable Jim Mars. In this year's season premiere, we're going to talk about his new book, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, How the New World Order, Man-Made Diseases, and Zombie Banks Are Destroying America. Fascinating read that really covers a whole bunch of different areas that aren't really a part of the previous Jim Mars canon of investigation. We'll delve into the agenda behind the current financial crisis, the emerging New World Order, pandemics, Big Pharma, issues with the food industry, global warming, Codex Alimentarius, the Federal Reserve, and the Council on Foreign Relations, how to fix the mess that America finds itself in, and, of course, much, much more. Then we'll find out about the parts of the book that Jim had censored by the publishers. Yes, there is material that was not allowed in the $1 Trillion Conspiracy, and you're going to find out about that here on the season premiere of BOA Audio. Plus, since it is our annual conversation with Jim Mars, we'll talk about the last year in ufology and get his thoughts on where he sees the UFO phenomenon going as we close out 2010. So, in total, it is a remarkable conversation here that covers a wealth of periphery areas in the world of conspiracy research, as I said, that had not previously been discussed by Jim in his many outstanding books leading up to this one. And you don't want to hear me yakking any longer. You've been waiting way too long as it is. Given that this is Jim's 6th appearance on the program, you really don't need me to go over the official bio one more time. The books that either you should own or be ordering or have read are Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy, Alien Agenda, Rule by Secrecy, Spies, The Terror Conspiracy, and Rise of the Fourth Reich. I can't put over, of course, Rule by Secrecy enough. That's the one that started me on my journey of investigation into the esoteric. That's why we feature Jim Mars here on the program every season to kick off another year of BOA Audio. He laid the foundation for this entire enterprise, and thus he does every year on the show as well. His website is www.jimmars.com, JIMMARRS.com, and the latest book is The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, How the New World Order, Man-Made Diseases, and Zombie Banks Are Destroying America. Check it out. With all that said, folks, let's get down to business and rock and roll. The wait is over. BOA Audio Season 6 starts now. This interview was recorded on November 4th, 2010. Jim Mars joins us for the season premiere of BOA Audio Season 6. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the season premiere of BOA Audio Season 6. I can't believe it. We're already kicking off our 6th year of the program, and as anybody who's been listening to the show long enough knows, we always start the season off with this week's guest. This man inspired me to investigate the esoteric from the very beginning with his amazing book, Rule by Secrecy, and ever since then I've pretty much just devoured every book that he's come out with over the last decade or so at this point. It's been quite a long run here so far. And this past summer, he released his latest book, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, How the New World Order, Man-Made Diseases, and Zombie Banks Are Destroying America. He is a superstar beyond superstars in the world of esoterica and the parapolitics, paranormal scene. He is, of course, investigative reporter Jim Mars. Welcome back to BOA Audio, Jim. Thank you once again for helping us kick off another season of Banal of America Audio.
Hey, Tim, it's always a pleasure to be with you, and I'm just really tickled to death to find out that you're still plugging along after all this time.
Thank you very much, sir. I really appreciate it, and it's a testament to guys like you who keep coming back and helping us to establish this program for what it is. Now, the new book, I love it. It is amazing. I finished it yesterday. In a way, because last year, I think when we talked, you had the fiction book coming out, so you sort of had taken a step back from the scene a little bit as far as contemporary stuff goes. So in a way, I got the feeling this book was kind of like how the world has gone to hell in a handbasket since you last heard from me.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. And of course, I just had to jump back into the reality, what's really going on. And the $1 Trillion Conspiracy, not only covers the financial meltdown, who caused it, and things like liar's loans and the incredible bundling and derivative aspects, which has just wrecked our economy. But it also gets into bad food and water, Codex Alimentarius. If you don't know what that is, you better find out, because if they keep pushing this through, you're going to have to go to a doctor and pay for a doctor's call just to get a prescription so you can get some vitamin C. Biological weapons, how that they created a biological weapon known as a mycoplasma. This is probably one of, if not the cause of Gulf War syndrome, and now it's behind a whole variety of so-called modern diseases that nobody had ever heard of 20 years ago, like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome and stuff like that. And of course, they are trying to say, well, here, we'll vaccinate you against all this. And yet the studies and what's coming out more and more is that the vaccinations themselves are the problem. Let's face it, last year about this time, we were all scared to death of swine flu. Well, whatever happened to that, man? I mean, that was kind of a nothing deal, and yet everybody took the vaccination. And now they're having other kinds of problems. And part of the problem is our dumbed-down education system. And it all goes back to the one man who helped create the foundation of our modern education apparatus, John D. Rockefeller, who was quoted as saying, well, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. And, of course, and then we're also led around by the incredibly tight mass media control. There's like 5 corporations that control, and they all have interlocking boards of directors. So you got a handful of media moguls who are deciding everything we see and hear. Okay, do we get thoughtful intellectual discourse in the mass media? No, we get Lady Gaga wearing meat. God, where in the hell are we? And of course, when you try to do something about this, then they clamp down, and we're rapidly moving into a police state. Except it's worse than the police. This is turning into a martial law state. We have a law in this country which nobody seems to be aware of called posse comitatus. It was passed in 1870, and it came about because of the excesses of Reconstruction, and everybody said this is ridiculous because so many of the southern states were under martial law, and they said this is intolerable, so they passed posse comitatus, which states the U.S. military cannot be used to police the civilian population. A very, very smart separation of powers here between the government and the people. And yet we are just progressively doing away with that. 9/11. Everybody saw the troops in the airport. Oh, that's okay. Drugs. Now we got the Coast Guard and the military fighting drugs. Well, that seemed reasonable at the time. But it just, it's just the slow creep of totalitarianism.
Exactly. Yeah, it never goes back to. They just keep stepping a little bit over the line and keep going further and further. Yeah, I was going to say, you kind of nailed it here, because in my notes I wanted to stress, the book not just covers the economy, but also, as Jim said, food, biowarfare, big pharma, education, privacy, the media. So a whole bunch of areas that I'd never seen you cover before, except maybe tangentially and some other stuff, really get the in-depth treatment here in the book. So Jim Morris fans definitely want to pick this one up for all new insights into a whole bunch of different areas.
Tim, here's a new thing, too. As you know, in most of my past books, I'm trying to detail here's what's wrong. Mm-hmm. And here's what's gone astray of what the society we should be living in. Well, this one, at the end, I actually present, here's some things we could do about it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And another thing, we talk about the $1 trillion conspiracy. First off, I'll cut you and your listeners in on a little secret. That was not my original title, okay? My original title was Zombie Nation.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, because zombies is a big, the concept, I guess you could say, of zombies is a big theme in the book, which was a surprise to me. And I'm sure, let's extrapolate on that, because obviously, as you just said, it was a big part of what you had in mind going into it. So I guess, flesh out this zombie thing.
Okay. Well, the thing is, of course, the zombies, let's eat your brains. That's kind of a popular fad. So I latched onto that, but there is some validity to the comparison. We're told that banks, which hold more liabilities than assets, in other words, they owe more money than they've got. They're broke, but they're propped up with TARP money, and so they're called zombie banks, okay, because they're dead, but they're still going through the motions thanks to taxpayer money. Mm-hmm. Well, it's been estimated that if every American sold every asset they've got, it would total no more than maybe $10 trillion. And yet today, depending on who you listen to, collectively, we owe in this country between $12 and $15 trillion. In other words, we're broke, but we're still going through the motions. So we're a zombie nation, and I think it holds together. And when we're bantering around the number $1 trillion. Oh, $1 trillion. Yeah, we got $1 trillion here, and we sent $1 trillion over there, and we got $1 trillion going. You know, Ben Bernanke, the chairman of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, before Congress, they were asking about these credit swaps and where they sent trillions of U.S. tax dollars overseas to foreign banks. And they said, well, wait a minute, you know, what kind of collateral did they give us? Which banks got all this money, and what are they using it for? And he says, well, you know, Federal Reserve System, that's a private banking system. It really has no direct connection to the government, and that's proprietary information. And so I'm not going to tell you that. so they send our trillions of our money overseas, and then they won't even tell us what happened to it. Are we a zombie nation or what? Now let's think about $1 trillion real quick, and just to give you an idea of what $1 trillion is. $1 trillion is probably a number that is just beyond any of our real comprehension. 1 trillion square miles, 1 trillion square miles would be 3.7 million states the size of Texas. Wow. That's just unimaginable.
Yeah.
And yet, that's the kind of money that they're sucking out of this country. Now, Tim, let's think about it in the most basic form here, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Are there still plenty of resources in the United States? Yes. We've got good farmland. We've got mineral resources. We've got you know, a wonderful country here.
Yeah.
Now, what about the American people? Well, okay, despite being dumbed down and turned into couch potatoes of a television and mesmerized and being led around like sheep, nevertheless, there is a public education system. And by the time most people are grown, they at least have a pretty good ability to read and write. So we have a reasonably educated workforce, right?
Yeah.
So we got an educated workforce. We're rich in mineral resources and other resources. Why are we in such bad economic straits? We should be prosperous, right?
Absolutely.
Well, we're the way we are. We're in such economic straits. The dollar, you know, prices are going up. Inflation's going up. The dollar's worth less and less and less because, folks, it's meant to be that way. Somebody somewhere wants it that way. If they didn't want it that way, it wouldn't be that way. We have the potential in this country to be a wealthy, prosperous country as we were for the first 200 years of our existence. So why are we in such a problem today? Because they have divided and conquered. They have divided and conquered our society. And today, there's nobody who says, oh, I'm glad to be an American. No, man, you're either a conservative or a liberal or a Democrat or a Republican or a male or a female or a heterosexual or a homosexual or a Jew or a Christian or a Catholic or a Protestant. I mean, anything to divide us and conquer us. And we're falling for it. That's the sad part.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I guess from what you're saying here, to sort of like put it in 9/11 terms, the economic collapse, unlike what they're saying in the media, which is that it was quasi-accidental as a result of avarice. This is more of a lie-hop situation or a my-hop situation where they let it happen or made it happen. I guess you're kind of saying they made it happen.
Well, they admit to it. For example, the Great Depression of the 30s, which began with the stock market crash in 29. Again, to quote Ben Bernanke, he says, yeah, we did it. We're sorry. Okay. So, 75 years later, they'll say, yeah, we did it. 75 years from now, everybody will understand. Just like right now, you remember all the controversy in 2000 over the hanging chads and the vote count in Florida and the appointment by the Supreme Court and all that controversy over the selection of 2000. And, it was a big controversy then. Well, today, nobody's really pays attention to this. Nobody cares anymore.
Yeah.
But today, it's been firmly established Al Gore won the election. Okay? That's not a guess or a conspiracy theory. That's a fact. But he didn't get to be president, did he?
No.
So, we're going to have to wait another 20, 30 years, and then we'll find out that this economic squeeze that we're in right now is totally manipulated and originated with what is with the new term they've come up with, the banksters, which is a combination of gangster and banker. And they're admitting to it.
Yeah.
But nobody's paying attention to that because they control the mass media. And they will never, just like classic example, one of the founding controversies in this country was whether or not we wanted to have a central bank. Well, Thomas Jefferson and all the freedom-loving people realized, because of the experience of the European nations, that when you have a central bank, the central bank pretty much runs the show, because you're going to become indebted to it, and then it starts calling the shots, and the bank will run the country. So they said, no, we don't need a central bank. Alexander Hamilton, on the other hand, some of the rich guys said, well, come on now, we got to have rich people handling the money, because they know how to handle money because they're rich. Okay?
Yeah.
And that was a huge controversy. And they tried the old Bank of the United States and the Bank of America, these central banks, and every time there was corruption, there was criminal activity, the economy sank, people, they were confiscating people's farms and homes, and so they'd do away with it, and then they'd create another one. And finally, about 1832, when Andrew Jackson, the first Westerner to become president of the United States, and he called these international bankers a den of vipers, and he ended the central bank. And that lasted until 1913, when on a Christmas Eve, with mostly Congress people out of town and not really thinking about congressional business, they slipped through the Federal Reserve Act and created the Federal Reserve, which is neither federal nor has any reserves. It just prints money and then loans this paper money to the government at face value. It's amazing, and nobody seems to catch on. And when they do, they can't seem to do anything about it. We've had the Fed now since 1913, and almost every session of Congress, somebody's calling for an audit, and yet it has never been audited. You can't find out what they're doing with your money. I mean, how many people would put up with that in their personal life? You're going to hand over all your money to, say, some neighbor, and the neighbor won't tell you what he's doing with it or where it goes or anything else. I mean, it's insane, but that's the way it works. And that's where we find ourselves. And it's time that people wake up and start trying to regain control over the country that the republic that they were given.
Absolutely, yeah. Seems everything's gotten out of control. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And of course, you never heard anybody refer to the Federal Reserve System as the central bank until about, 10 years ago, maybe a little more. And then just all of a sudden, in the media, they go, well, the central bank today announced, new interest rates, blah, blah, blah. Well, wait a minute. When did we ever vote for a central bank? We didn't want one. We never had one. We tried to get rid of it, and all of a sudden we got one. And in fact, if you go back and study the inception of the Federal Reserve System, you'll find that the bankers who created it were very specific. In their secret meetings, they said, we must never refer to it as a central bank. And they didn't until after so many generations had come along that had totally lost the concept of a central bank and what it could do to them. And then just blithely, then they just began to say, the central bank today. And we got it. And we didn't even know what we got. It's amazing, Tim.
Yeah, exactly. Now, to look at this like on a geopolitical level, and then in comparison to the current economic situation, you hear all the time when they were bailing out the banks and everything that the banks and the other companies and stuff were too big to fail, and then you get almost the impression that really, if you pull the camera back a little bit, it's more like it's America that's teetering on failure, and it's too big to fail, so we have to keep propping it up. But based on sort of what I got from the book, it seems like really the end game plan here is to fail. That's their goal.
We're being set up for failure, and there's a purpose in this, because, you always hear about the New World Order, which is really actually not new, and there's not much order to it. It's, in fact, you can go all the way back to Adolf Hitler, who talked about a New World Order. And the biggest stumbling block to this New World Order, and okay, let's stop and explain. Here's what they mean by New World Order. I think it was actually laid out back in 1948 by a British Fabian socialist by the name of Eric Arthur Blair. And he wrote a book in that year of 1948, and he transposed the numbers, and he published this book entitled 1984, and he used the pen name George Orwell. But now Eric Arthur Blair, being a socialist, I think he, and being well connected to the British aristocracy and the royals, I think he had a true understanding of what the game plan was. And if you go back and reread 1984, you find that the wealthy elite have divided the world into three predominant economic blocks. In the book, it's called Oceania, Asiana, and East Asiana. Okay, today they're working hard to actually make that real. In today's real world, we have the European Union, which is in existence and is already drawing controversy and criticism from its own members. And then the soon-to-be North American Union, where they're going to blend the economies of Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And they're well along on this plan, although they just hadn't quite called it that yet. And then at some future date, there will be the Asian unions, and that's going to be easy enough to form because most of the Asian nations are just pyramid power. You got a dictator or a family or a handful of people at the top ruling everything, and everybody else is just, peons. And so that'll be easy enough because you just take the ruling people and you buy them out, or you put them on your board, and then you got control of the Asian nations, and you got an Asian Union. So the stumbling block actually has been the United States. Why? Well, because we have a tradition of individual freedom and liberty. And two, we have the legal foundation for this individual freedom and liberty, which is the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And third, we got guns. So we're in a position to enforce our freedom and liberty. So they had to destroy us. They have to get this roadblock out of the way so they can create their three-part world globalist socialist system. And why do they want socialism? Well, wait a minute. We're talking about these rich, wealthy Wall Street bankers and City of London bankers. Why would they want socialism? Because communism was socialism. Communism was the exact opposite of capitalism, right?
Yeah.
Well, not really, okay? Because here's the thing. Under any social program, no matter how benevolent it may sound, it always requires central administration. You've got to have a central authority to run a effective social program. And the wealthy elite, the plutocrats, know that they have the power and the wealth that they can buy up the central authority and thereby rule the world.
Yeah.
But not in the name of despotism and tyranny, but in the name of social equality, where we're all equal,
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing, here's what people just don't understand, because socialism, on the one hand, and I've been criticized by some people that say, well, you talk about socialism like it's a bad thing. Well, not really. There are obviously certain social programs that are necessary in a benevolent society, all right? There are always old people, infirm people that need to be taken care of by society, and there should be, and there are programs to do this, but they can get out of hand. But the main problem with socialism is that when you try to socialize everyone and make everyone equal, then you are creating a ambitionless society.
Yeah.
And I think this was quite shown effectively by a college professor who his class on political science, they were arguing back and forth about socialism, and he says, okay, I'll tell you what. He said, I'm going to we're going to practice socialism in this class. He said, the next test, he said, I'm just going to average all the grades, and everybody gets the same grade. And everybody kind of looked at each other. So the first test came up, and everybody made a C. All right. Now, the people who had not studied for the test thought that was a really great deal. Hey, good. I've done it. Break sweat, and I got a C. But the people who had studied and had made A's and B's on their test, needless to say, they were miffed because they'd studied for an A and a B, and they ended up with a C.
Yeah.
So the second test came along, and everybody made a D.
Yeah, because the ones who studied knew better.
Ones who said, well, why do I need to study when I'm going to end up with a C? You know, so they didn't study, and the thing dropped, and everybody got a D. And on the third test, he flunked the entire class. And that, my friends, is a classic example of socialism at work.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a great story. Wow.
Well, it sounds good. It sounds good. You know, we'll just average out all the grades, and then everybody gets the same grade. You know, that way everybody can feel good about themselves, and you know, we're not going to have any winners, and we're not going to have any losers. You know, and we'll do. It sounds great, but it just doesn't work. Never has.
Now, why do you think the New World Order is intent on sort of molding this world into, you know, a few competing socialist blocks, as you say in the book? Why not just one? You know, I guess obviously it really would be one world under their control, but with the perception of this, would the perception of that competition just be, you know, to sort of keep the brainwash going?
It's about profit and control. If it's all just one world government, then, you know, oh, okay, well, that's the government, okay. But if you have the three different blocks, and again, read Orwell's 1984. Two of the blocks are always at war with each other.
Yeah.
And then they will finally either win or lose or make peace, and then they'll turn and then they'll go to war with the other block. So they're always in conflict. So they've got to have the conflict. They don't want a one world government because then there's no conflict. Now, what they want is the conflict between the major blocks, at least the perceived conflict, as you say. They're going to control them all, but they want the perceived conflict for maximizing profit and control. What is the purpose of government anyway? The only true purpose of government, the only real reason for government is for collective defense, for protection, for security.
Yeah.
All right, and that's how, you know, that's why today, no matter what it is, it might be whether it's the price of beans or the height of your corn, it doesn't matter. It's all national security, all right, because that is the only overreaching claim and defense for big government. So we can defend you. Well, you know, if it's one world government, then, well, wait a minute. There's no need for that.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
So they got to have the conflict so that they can keep selling arms and they can keep maximizing profits and keep people fearful. You know, by the way, in 1984, if you'll recall, the boogeyman was Goldman. Goldman was behind everything. Of course, they couldn't quite catch Goldman, didn't quite know where he was, wasn't even sure exactly what he looked like, but he was behind everything. He was kind of like Professor Moriarty, right? He was behind everything. Sounds kind of like Osama bin Laden, doesn't it? Who was that? Osama bin who? We've already forgotten about him, haven't we?
Yeah.
In fact, you know, it's actually go all the way back to less than a year after 9/11 attacks. In the spring of 2002, President George W. Bush was asked about bin Laden. He said, well, we haven't heard much from him lately, and frankly, I'm not that concerned about him. Oh well, forget him. Except, wait a minute, here it is 10 years later, and we're still fighting in Afghanistan, where we went to get bin Laden, and we're still fighting in Iraq because, you know, they had something to do with 9/11, or did they? No, wait a minute. Bush said they had nothing to do with 9/11. So I don't know. I missed something there. I'm not sure why we're in Iraq.
We're supposed to be looking for weapons, I thought.
Yeah, we're looking for weapons of mass destruction, which I guess we're still looking. Meanwhile, we're killing people and destroying places. I don't know. I don't quite get it.
Yeah. Now, what do you make of, here we are, we're talking on November 4th, so we're about 2 days removed from the big election. What do you make of, I guess you could say, the recent flip sort of back to this GOP, at least half the Congress? I get the impression, based on looking at the past, and believe me, I was excited about Obama. I should have known better. I've been in this long enough. I don't know what I must be an idiot, but obviously now 2 years in, I'm hip to the game again. And
well, you should have called me, Tim. I could have warned you. Because here, I'll just give you the ball face. Here's the ball face facts of the situation, and this is what people just I don't understand it. Why they don't get it. From 1989 to 1993, we had the Republican administration of George Herbert Walker Bush. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, every member of his cabinet, except for Vice President Dan Quayle, who couldn't spell potato, and his old buddy Jim Baker, were members of that secretive globalist organization, the Council on Foreign Relations. Mm-hmm. So that's actually who was in control. But then, from 93 to 2000, we had the Democratic administration of Bill Clinton. Every cabinet member, except for Secretary of Defense William Perry, was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. But then we shifted, of course, in the selection of 2000 to George W. Bush, and let's look at his cabinet. Dick Cheney, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, Donald Rumsfeld, Robert Gates, Elaine Chao, Christine Todd Whitman, all members of the Council on Foreign Relations. But in 2008, we all went for change we could believe in. And we got Barack Hussein Obama. All right. Let's look at his cabinet. Robert Gates, Council on Foreign Relations, he's still there. Janet Napolitano, Bill Richardson, Susan Rice, James Earl Jones, Timothy Geithner, Larry Summers, Paul Vogner, all Council on Foreign Relations. So what's changed? Nothing.
Yep.
The same rulers have ruled us through both a Democrat and Republican administration. So this whole thing about let's elect a Democrat, let's elect a Republican, it's nonsense. They're both controlled by the same people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I guess I just shut my brain off there for a while. It's better. I guess you can hope for good things to happen because chances are bad things are going to happen anyway. You know what I mean? So right. that was the attitude.
but when you look, right away, when if you go back to say 2006, 2005, you'd never even heard of Barack Hussein Obama.
Yeah.
You never even heard of him. And then all of a sudden, he's a man of the hour. Why, he's the new Messiah. Yeah, he's the guy. Well, when you see something like that, then you do what I do, which is you go and check and find out, who's behind him.
Yeah, exactly.
And what I found out is that his key advisors was Zbigniew Brzezinski.
Exactly, yep.
Head of the Trilateral Commission. And he and David Rockefeller, of course, were big Council on Foreign Relations members, and then they helped branch off and form the Trilateral Commission, which was designed to bring in the Asian economies into their world banking conglomerate. Well, once you understand that Brzezinski is behind Obama and that Henry Kissinger is behind Bush, you realize that the puppet masters never change, just the hand puppets, okay?
Exactly.
It's amazing. But everybody just keeps, we just keep stampeding along. Why? Because we watch television.
Well, that brings up a good point. So do you think this sort of flip back was sort of manufactured by the media and sort of spurred on by them to God knows what, create more chaos or sort of change? I feel like there's a change sort of in the style between the two parties, even though the people behind the scenes don't change.
Well, hey, of course there's a difference. One is represented by a donkey, and one is represented by an elephant. Why, that's change you can believe in. Now, let me tell you something, Tim. This past Tuesday, I think, is if it didn't prove anything else, it should have proved to anyone who is absolutely thinking on their feet that your vote doesn't count. these electronic voting machines have wrecked the voting process. Now, voting has always been a tricky deal, and there's always been problems, and there's always been corruption. You know, here in Texas, I still remember as a kid, everybody talking about mysterious Box 13, which got Lyndon Johnson elected to the Senate, put him on the road to the presidency, and there was a huge controversy and scandal over that, and then for years, and then finally a court said, we want to see the votes and we want to count the votes. And when they all opened Box 13, there was nothing there. All the votes had disappeared, went away, even though the people who had seen them when they were there said that several hundred of them were all in the same handwriting, you know, and we're listing people who were known to be dead. So, you know, we've always had problems, but at least then there's court cases. You can eventually get to the box. You can eventually get to the votes or not and realize that it was a fraudulent election. But today it's all in computer. And today there's no paper trail. And today there's no way of telling whether your vote counts or not. And I'm telling you this, in traveling around the country and in talking on so many radio programs and listening to people calling in, there was a huge backlash in this country. And there was many people who did not want to vote for the Democrat or the Republican. They wanted something different. They wanted to show that the public was in charge, not the politicians. And yet, when the voting's done, we find, there's 51 for the Democrats and 48 for the Republicans, and, nothing in between particularly. Wait a minute. It doesn't make sense. In fact, there was this campaign in Ohio, and the man running for the Constitutionalist Party, early on, it showed he had 14% of the vote with 15,000 votes. And then all of a sudden, within an hour, he dropped to 3,000 votes, and he lost. You know, he even trailed the Libertarian. What happened to those votes? Where'd they go? Well, they went off into the cyberspace, just went away.
Interesting.
And that's what happens. There's another instance. I'm still looking into this. I'm going to put together a list of all the voting irregularities that took place, and yet we are so dumbed down, we are so pacified, so mollified that, you know, right now I can't think of a single race where anybody is contesting the election.
Yeah.
It's like, well, gee, the computer said it's this, so it must be this. That's wrong, folks. Well, you know, and if you don't have a vote, you don't have anything.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. Well, I guess, like, kind of what I was, to jump back to a little bit of what I was talking about, it seems like under the Bush era, it was a little bit, at least as far as what the people in the conspiracy movement were looking at, you know, and were upset about, seemed like a push more towards the police state, and then Obama came in and it seemed like more of a push towards the socialism end of things. Meanwhile, of course, the police state stuff just keeps going on. It's not like he stopped.
Right.
So it seems like almost, you know, they're pushing their whole agenda in, you know, in alternating, you know, methodologies, if you will.
Right.
Do you get what I mean?
Well, Tim, as you well know, because I was on your program during the Bush administration, and it's not like I'm pro-Bush and anti-Obama,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I'm anti-New World Order, and the New World Order controls them both. And if you want any more clear example, the Obama campaigned on the idea of transparency in government, right? He even said that the vital issues will be broadcast on C-SPAN, and everybody can see what we're doing. Well, that hasn't happened. And in fact, there's more secrecy, more denial of freedom of information request, more secretiveness than in the Bush administration. 64% more rejections of Freedom of Information Act request under the Obama administration than under the Bush administration. So I'm not trying to say Bush was good and Obama's bad. I'm trying to say that as bad as Bush was, Obama has not done any better. In fact, in some instances, done worse. So again, there's no change.
Yeah, exactly. To look at the economy a little bit, what do you make of this sort of rush? I guess you could call it a gold rush of the last few years. A lot of people are sort of trying to grab as much gold as they can in light of what's going on. Do you think the government's going to step in and confiscate the gold or start trying to, stop this thing from happening?
Well, they're not going to be able to confiscate gold. Can you picture trying to bust in doors and have goods and say, "Give me your gold"? They'd tear the place apart looking for that little handful of gold coin. Nah, ain't going to happen. But what's going to happen is it's already happened before. In the back in the 30s, during the Depression, they outlawed the use of gold for trade and barter and means of exchange. So they'll outlaw it. And you're going to have to go to the Ameros or whatever the heck they're going to call the new money, which they will probably, stack at about, 10 cents on the dollar to what you got. So in other words, you got $100 now, and then when they say, okay, in the current crisis, we got this new money coming in, so you'll have $10 of new money based on your $100. Yeah, it's going to be bad.
Will your debt go down in turn?
No, probably not.
Shit.
The money's worth less and less, and yet look at the prices. They just keep going up and up and up.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what, I think, gold is always a good standby, and gold at some point will always be valuable. But, frankly, I think you'd be wiser to invest in tomato seeds.
Interesting. All right.
Hey, if you just think about it, even the mainstream media was talking about the ugly mood of the country, and they were, predicting this landslide for Republicans, to try to change everything up. And yet Harry Reid's back in, Pelosi's back in. What's changed? Nothing. So either we're all a bunch of idiots or the vote is fraudulent.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that seems true. And you'd think that by now the third-party candidates would have more showing, but
exactly.
Never seems to be the case.
I can't tell you. The Libertarians have managed to get on the ballot, I think, in every state. And you would think that they would at least come up with 10% of the vote. I'm not going to say they would have won, but, they would at least have a respectable, negligible. Something's wrong, folks.
Beyond just the mainstream media sort of brainwashing of the two-party system?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Okay. Now,
people wanted something different, and yet we get the same thing. What is that? And this whole thing between Democrat and Republican, the Bush administration, the way you can tell if a politician's lying to you is if his mouth's moving. And I don't say that too facetiously because unfortunately it's a truism. Any politician who's going to tell you the truth probably will never get elected because, if they say, yeah, I'm going to have to increase your taxes, they're not going to get elected.
Exactly.
So they got to say, no new taxes. Read my lips. So so you can't trust anything they say. You have to watch what they do. And the classic examples are George W. Bush, Republican, and Barack Hussein Obama, a Democrat. All right. Now, Bush talked a good conservative game, and yet he didn't do any of that. He launched, wars of aggression. He set up torture chambers. My God, when did that come about in America? And he instituted No Child Left Behind, one of the most socialist programs there's ever been. In fact, but here's what throws everybody off, Tim. Everybody thinks of socialism where you're going to take from the wealthy and give to the poor. This is corporate socialism where you take from the poor and you give to the rich. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what throws people off because they go, wait a minute. And so Bush talks conservatism, but he wasn't a conservative. He was a national socialist is what he was.
Yeah.
But, of course, they couldn't use that term because anybody with a sense of history realizes that national socialism is what in the German language, the acronym is Nazi. Okay? Mm-hmm. So you're not going to vote for a Nazi. So they had to come up with a new term. They came up with neoconservative, a neocon. Okay, well, we got neocons, all right. And so, and people, though, by 2008 were beginning to kind of catch on. Wait a minute, he says all this, but he's not doing it. We're still fighting these wars. Our economy's going to hell. They've got the bankers are just taking over. They're nationalizing businesses. Oh, wow, let's change. So we got Obama administration, and look what they've done. More socialism. All they've done is shifted us from National Socialism to Marxist socialism. And the way they do that is the oldest maneuver in the book. It's the old used car salesman's trick. You're walking along the street, and they grab you, put you in there, and say, talk to you, good old Butch, slap you on the back. Pretty soon it's, hey, do you like the red one or the green one? Well, I kind of like the red one. Okay, well, here, come on in, let's sign the papers. Wait a minute, I didn't even want to buy a car, So it's like, do you want National Socialism, Marxist socialism? Oh, wait a minute. What if I don't want socialism at all? What if I want free market capitalism? So, you cannot listen to what they say. You have to watch what they do.
Now, I'm hearing some wind chimes in the background. What, are you outside or something?
Yeah, I stepped out on the porch. It's really beautiful here, Indian summer in Texas.
Sounds nice. It's raining like a sumbitch here, so at least one of us is enjoying the weather.
We gotta spread this stuff around. Let's put it on the internet.
You're listening to Banal of America Audio.
Great heavens! What kind of radio show is this?
Now, just to sort of wrap up a little bit of the sort of financial end of this whole thing, what do you, based on your research, what do you advocate? A return to a gold standard, or just folding the Fed into the U.S. government and sort of ending that independent central bank?
Well, here's the biggest fraud. What they're talking now is the Federal Reserve is going to buy U.S. Treasury notes. So in other words, they're going to print paper money that's not worth anything except the paper it's printed on, and they're going to buy U.S. Treasury notes, which is based on the goods and services and hard work of the American people. Well, what kind of fraud is that? It's ridiculous. Yeah, we need, number one, at the very least, we need to audit the Federal Reserve System.
Yeah.
And, of course, they had a great support for that in Congress, but it never happened. What does that tell you? Congress is emasculated. They can't do anything. So obviously they're not in control. Well, if Congress, our elected representatives, are not in control, then who is in control? We need to start figuring out who's truly in control and then just take whatever the appropriate steps are. Actually, corporatism, which is actually what we're operating under, and by the way, Benito Mussolini, the Italian dictator in World War II, is credited with the word fascism because it stems from his black-shirted fascistas. And, of course, fascism is defined as the combining of state and corporate power. Well, I defy anybody to argue successfully with me that that's not where we are right now. We're operating in a country that has a blend of corporate power and government power.
Yeah.
Now, the difference between us and Nazi Germany and fascist Italy is that in those two countries back in the 30s, the state, the government, if you will, took over the corporations, gained control over them, and that combination was fascism. Today in America, they just reversed it. The corporations have taken control of the government.
Yeah, exactly.
But the end result's the same, and we need to understand that. But, corporate, and Mussolini said fascism is probably not really the correct term. It more correctly should be termed corporatism. Well, now, corporatism, I don't know. Corporatism might be something we could work with because the corporations all look to the bottom line, right? They want to make sure they're making a profit for their investors, stockholders. Okay, well then that means that we do then have some modicum of control. All we got to do is quit buying something, they'll quit making it.
Exactly, right? Vote with your dollar.
Exactly. And if everybody will quit buying diet soft drinks with aspartame in it, which turns into formaldehyde in your system and starts pickling your brain, and was pushed through over the objections of the federal regulators by Donald Rumsfeld when he was the CEO of Searle Pharmaceuticals, if everybody would just quit buying those diet soft drinks, they'd take it out or they'd change it, right?
Yeah.
So at least then you could affect some change. But see, you can only do that if you have a literate and educated, in the broadest sense, population. And no, but, we're just hammered 24/7 with the electronic matrix woven by television.
Goes back to the zombie nation.
Zombie nation.
Now, you sort of referenced here the swine flu and how that was such a huge to-do last year. And it seems like over the last decade there's been quite a few of those between SARS and bird flu. And I guess I'm wondering...
The purpose of that, of course, of those false pandemics and is fear-mongering. And the fear-mongering is to get everybody to take their vaccinations. And when you take the vaccinations, which not only is inoculating you with whatever it is they're trying to prevent, I mean, that's what a vaccination is, polio. They give you a little bit of polio so your body can overcome it and then theoretically build up a resistance, and then you won't get the real thing. But, see, not only are you getting the real thing, but you're getting squalene and you're getting all these other adjutants that have been proven to be quite harmful. So, in other words, they basically, and this comes back to what the elitists, the globalists, call eugenics or population control, and people need to be aware of this because this is not some philosophical argument over the ingredients of our foods and our drugs. They want to kill us. This is a matter of self-defense.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty, you introduced some seriously bizarre and interesting facts about food in there, too, that I'd never even heard of, like that a couple of them here I put in my notes. Typical consumer over 8 years old eats 4 meals away from home per week, and that half of each dollar spent by an American on food is prepared outside the home. Right. It's like, that's just stunning. But when you think about it, it's true. Makes a lot, I eat a lot of meals away from home. It seems like a lot of people do. And then you put your trust into the hands of people that, you shouldn't be.
Well, and there's a purpose behind that. And again, it comes back to the socialism and control. When I was a young kid, my mother made all the food, okay? She had flour and baking soda and all these basic ingredients, and then she made the food, so we knew how to feed ourselves. Today, if all the fast food places shut down, half the population wouldn't know how to feed themselves.
Yeah.
So what would they do? They'd have to turn to the government. They'd have to go down and get the government cheese or the government peanut butter sandwiches or whatever they gave them, and they would be totally dependent on the government. That is very tight control.
Yeah, and to go back to the idea of the corporations taking over the government, and you just see sort of how, they're sort of like doing the job so the government doesn't have to, like McDonald's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And that is tremendous social control. I noticed that San Francisco has outlawed or made illegal giving away free toys with the fast food, which is one small step. I don't know how effective that's going to be, but if you think about it, you can hardly turn down your children's screams about, we got to go to the fast food place so I can get the latest toy.
Yeah.
I don't know. But you have to be thoughtful and you have to think about the ramifications of everything to try to work your way through that kind of system.
Okay, yeah. So what I had been thinking about the pandemics, too, was that it seems almost like, based on what you said about sort of these, for lack of a better term, sort of like sneaky pandemics that you mentioned earlier, like the Gulf War thing and chronic fatigue. It's almost like people should keep an eye out maybe for these emerging diseases that are sort of just drag people down, than this massive sort of plague-like pandemic that they keep warning us about. It's almost like there is a sort of pandemic going on, but it's like smaller, sort of isolated diseases that people, just sort of just hear about.
They don't really notice it. And again, in my book, The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, I've got a whole section devoted to this mycoplasma attack. This was actually came from the Nazis. All right. Now, we not only brought over, after the war, thousands of unreconstructed Nazis and rolled them into our military-industrial complex because we wanted their rocket science and we wanted their weaponry, but we also brought in their mind control experts and their scientists who'd been working on population control, fluoridation, of course, being one of those. It was the Nazis who realized that by putting sodium fluoride in the drinking water of the concentration camps, that would keep the inmates passive and non-resistant. And so now 2/3 of the water supply of this country are fluoridated. And yet study after study shows that it's really not doing much to stop cavities.
Yeah.
It's only effective. For one thing, they tell you don't give fluoride toothpaste to small children. All right. It's only children between the ages of 6 and 12 that they can show that there is some slight decrease in cavities. But there's other things that happen too, such as discoloration of the teeth and the breakdown and brittleness of the teeth. This has all been shown scientifically, but of course you never hear about this because the mass media doesn't want to lose one of their biggest advertisers.
Yeah. And you make the point in the book that given all the bad stuff that's the result of fluoride, it's sort of an unfair trade-off just for a nice smile. So.
Exactly. But of course, see, there's never been, once you have the pharmaceutical companies, all of whom can trace their lineage back to the Nazi IG Farben chemical combine, that's where they have the huge control. For example, one of the big things today that really concerns so many people has been the recent increase in school shootings and teen suicides. And of course, all the mass media can talk about is guns. Ooh, got to take your guns away. Well, excuse me. When I was growing up in Texas, we took guns to school, and I had friends that had guns in the rack of their pickup trucks, but hey, nobody shot anybody.
Yeah.
It's not the guns, folks. It's the drugs. Virtually every single school shooter is either on or just coming off of psychotropic drugs. And but of course they can't talk about that because then they might lose their pharmaceutical advertising, which is one of, if not the largest advertiser on television. All you got to do is just stop and look at those commercials. If they're not selling you a truck or a car, they're selling you a drug.
Yeah, exactly. And I presume, obviously, I guess that the big pharma is really just one arm of the New World Order in a way.
Exactly.
The bank. It's not like big pharma is competing with the banks here. There's no factional situation. It's just one part of the whole thing.
It's all part of the same ball of wax.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's like you can't really escape this thing. It's invaded all aspects of life.
And again, this is really part of their attempt at population control. For example, one of the Prince Philip, the royal in England, he verbalized their whole outlook when he said human population growth is probably the single most serious long-term threat to survival. If it isn't controlled voluntarily, it will be controlled involuntarily by an increase in disease, starvation, and war. Whoops, excuse me, isn't that what we see happening? These weird diseases that are thinning the population, the starvation in some of the third world countries, and of course the ongoing regional no end in sight conflicts like Afghanistan, Iraq. Now, just to show that Prince Philip's was not just talking rhetorically and like maybe that will happen if we don't curb population. At another point, he was quoted as saying, "In the event that I am reincarnated, I would like to return as a deadly virus in order to contribute something to solve overpopulation." Well, he's voicing their beliefs and their philosophy. They want population reduction. They want us dead. So we better start paying attention, and they're being quite effective with that through their vaccines, the genetically modified food, fluoridation of the water, and of course the chemtrails, which we could devote a whole program just on that. But it's pretty insidious. And let me let me give you a good example. All through the Bush administration, the head of the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, was a Dr. Julie Gerberding. And she, of course, was leading the charge in vaccinations. You got to take your vaccination. Well, we're going to have bird flu. Well, we're going to have swine flu. Asian flu. You got to take your vaccinations. Well, soon as the Bush administration left office, she resigned as director of the Centers for Disease Control and became president of Merck Pharmaceuticals' vaccine division. Now, am I the only one that sees a conflict of interest there?
Clearly not. Well, maybe so, since it never gets mentioned anywhere.
No, it doesn't get mentioned, and that's the thing that really gripes me, Tim, because coming from the background as a professional journalist, there is no journalism. There's no journals anymore. There's simply corporate advertising distribution systems. And, if you happen to pick up a little news in the process, so much the better for you.
Yeah. The news today is just atrocious. So it's a pretty sad state of affairs.
Well, it's not designed to inform us. It's designed to distract us.
Absolutely, yeah. I thought one thing that you mentioned in the book that I thought was interesting with regards to global warming actually was that it seems like the whole universe is warming, not just Earth. So maybe the people who are blaming humans or all that. So maybe the whole argument's skewed in a sense that we're missing something big here.
It's bogus. It's not our SUVs, okay? And the reason I say that is because the ice caps on Mars are diminishing. In other words, they're melting. There's ice on the moons of Jupiter, which are diminishing. They're melting. Outer planets are becoming more luminescent, which means they're heating up a little bit. So whatever is causing this warming cycle, if that's what it is, it may just be cyclic. It may have to do with sunspots or solar flares, whatever it is. But whatever it is, it's solar system wide. It is not just the Earth. So in other words, the whole idea that we have to reduce our lifestyles and quit running our cars and but is just a fallacious argument.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I learned so much from this book that I just was blown away by all the interesting new sort of facts that came along in the book, as I said, especially about the food stuff and this universe thing.
Well, this is the topics that you never hear discussed in the corporate mass media.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Well, I never heard this universal warming, I guess you could say, theory until now, so it makes a lot of sense.
And, of course, I'm sure, Tim, that you're aware that a lot of the statistics that have been presented out of England, out of that center, which they were basing all their global warming stuff, has now shown to have lots of deficiencies. They were skipping certain periods. They were fudging the facts. So, again, it's reminiscent of the run-up to the invasion of Iraq, where we were told all of this stuff, and he was going to have a nuclear weapon in 6 weeks, and they had weapons of mass destruction, they had all this stuff, and what we now learn is exactly what the British were told back even in 2002 before we invaded Iraq, which is we were fixing the facts around the policy. In other words, they wanted to invade Iraq, so let's figure out what we can argue as reasons for doing so. And, of course, those reasons turned out to be inadequate at best.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and as you pointed out here in the beginning of the conversation, the book does lay out a lot of suggestions for how to fix things, which I really appreciate, because so many people I know you're an investigative journalist. You don't like to be tagged with the conspiracy theorist label, but I know a lot of people sort of in the parapolitical field often sort of say, the sky is falling, but never offer any alternatives to how to prop it up. You do a great job here in the book of really sort of laying out, I believe there's 36 suggestions on how to fix this mess that we're in. I guess talk a little bit about that. Obviously, don't tell us all 36, but give us your thoughts on sort of how that all came together and where you think we need to get.
Well, there's so many things we could be doing. Term limits, I think, is just unnecessary. We got to have term limits, not only in Congress but on the Supreme Court. We can't have people who've been on their entire lives and are wedded to certain philosophies and to certain political agendas. So we need to have term limits. We need to audit the Fed. One suggestion I particularly like is that every time a lobbyist should be limited to one lobbyist per congressman, okay? And then when that lobbyist goes to lobby the congressman for whatever issue it may be, and undoubtedly representing his paymasters, then a public advocate should go along. And when they argue, well, we've got to have this for this, then the public advocate can go, yeah, but wait a minute, for the good of the people, we need to have this. But see, there's none of that. Today there are, I can't even, 20,000 lobbyists or so many, and they gang tackle these congresspersons, and that's all they hear. And of course, it's also these corporate lobbyists are coming from the very companies who are funding the politicians. So if your whole goal is to get reelected, then you got to have campaign money. So that means who you're going to listen to? Just the poor old long-suffering tax-paying public, or the corporate lobbyists who have deep pockets.
Yeah, all right, yeah.
And we need to do that. But see, any of that is probably going to require votes of Congress.
Exactly.
And as we've just seen, we can't seem to get a handle on Congress. We can't even get rid of some of the people like Harry Reid, who was quoted as saying that the Constitution is irrelevant. What? And you're going to keep voting for this guy? I don't get it. I just don't get it. And again, I don't think, I really sincerely doubt that this is a case of just public stupidity and ignorance. I think this is more a case of voter fraud, thanks to the no paper trail computer voting. And that's another one of the points I said. We need to return to paper ballots and poll watchers. And you go ask anybody under the age of 40, they probably don't even know what a poll watcher is.
Yeah.
A poll watcher is a person who is assigned by a political candidate or a party or even a advocacy group to go and stand at the polling places and monitor it all day to make sure that the votes are fair. But see, that's questionable now, because I don't know, I'm not that great a computer expert. So if I go and stand at a polling place and everybody comes in and they've got their little voter cards and they go in the booth and they pull the lever and punch the machine, type the computer, and they come out with a smile on their face, then, how do you know that their vote was accurately tabulated?
Yeah.
And even if it was accurately tabulated at the precinct level, since it's all sent in by computer, how do you know it hadn't been hacked between the time it leaves the polling place and arrives at the tabulation center? You don't. And there's no way of knowing this. And, of course, we could spend the rest of the program talking about the numerous documented instances of these computer machines being hackable and making errors. And I don't know. There's just too many problems there. We need to do away with them.
As we've established here, this is the sixth time we've had you on the show, sixth year for the program. I remember looking back on one of our earlier interviews, and I think I asked you the simple question of, are we screwed here? And nothing seems to have gotten any better in the last few years since I first asked you that question. So, I mean, are we screwed here, or is there any chance that we're going to be able to turn this thing around?
Well, that's a tough question, because if we keep floating along like we are and still buying into the conservative, liberal, Democrat versus Republican paradigm, I don't think it's going to get any better. But if people as individuals would start opening their eyes and their ears and their minds and start thinking for themselves, turn off that TV, don't be guided by the mass media, look for alternative sources of information. If enough people, and I say enough people, it doesn't have to be everybody, might not even have to be 50% or more. I think if even 20% of the population would wake up, realize what's going on, and decide that they're going to become thoughtful Americans, okay? I don't care what your religion, I don't care what your skin color, I don't care what your educational background, but let's just all agree to disagree in a agreeable manner and be Americans who are concerned about the nation of the United States and what's best for it. I guess the classic example is, we're still in the middle of this war on terrorism, okay? We're supposed to be so afraid. We're supposed to be giving up our liberties, and you're supposed to go and let them look at your naked body at an airport and bombard you with terahertz rays, which scientific papers have shown to damage your DNA. But we'll put up with that because, after all, they got to protect us from the terrorists. Well, okay. Well, wait a minute. If there truly was an international terrorist organization intent on destroying America, intent on smuggling weapons of mass destruction into our country, wouldn't it seem to be a prudent step to secure the borders? But it hadn't been done, has it?
No.
So the war on terrorism is a fraud.
Just like the war on drugs and the war on poverty.
Exactly.
It's it's a big old mess. Now, when we set up the interview originally, you told me, you reminded me or suggested that I ask you about stuff that was censored from the book or not allowed to be published. So what's the hot material here that you couldn't put in there?
All right. Well, for the first time in my experience, I've had maybe four books canceled on me, even with a signed contract and with no real excuse, and most of them even after passing the legal review, which showed me that it was basically censorship. But if you're a publisher and you just, for whatever reason, decide, I'm not going to publish this book, well, okay, I don't agree with that, but I guess that's the way business operates. But for the first time in my experience on this one, I was overtly censored. I was told by an editor, I think you ought to take these sections out. And I argued back saying, no, I think these are important. They're well sourced. It's already passed the legal vetting, and I think people need to know this information. And the comeback was, well, let me put it this way. If you don't take these sections out, I will not publish the book. And the irony of this is the biggest section that they forced me to remove from the book was the section on how the corporate media controls the news.
Wow.
So I told this editor, I said, well, you kind of proved my point, didn't you? It's amazing. And, of course, that was the biggest section about how that the board, the directors of all these five major media corporations decide everything we see and hear. And I'm not just talking about news. I'm talking about movies, DVDs, computer, satellite, cable, broadcast, magazines, billboards, everything we see and hear, five corporations control. And no wonder we're all askewed and don't know what to think and befuddled. So that was the biggest thing that came out, along with the top censored stories of 2009, most of which concerned corporate malfeasance. So all that came out. The other thing that kind of surprised me, because I actually wasn't even writing about it per se, it was also in the section about the control over the media, was the total disconnect between truthful, factual information about 9/11 and the official conspiracy theory that we've been saddled with. And now, before anybody starts going, oh, no, more conspiracy theory, blah, 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 let me just point out that John Farmer, a former Attorney General of New Jersey, was the senior counsel of the 9/11 Commission. In other words, their top lawyer. And in 2009, he published a book called The Ground Truth. And on page 2, he writes, In the course of our investigation into the national response to the attacks, the 9/11 Commission staff discovered that the official version of what had occurred that morning, that is, what the government and military officials had told Congress, the Commission, the media, and the public about who knew what and when, was almost entirely and inexplicably untrue.
Yep, I had that in my notes, wanted to mention that. I'm glad you did bring that up. Stunning, that should be front page news.
Should be front page news, and yet there's not a word. And, of course, when you start debating the collapse of the World Trade Center buildings and how that, by all accounts, they appear to be the result of controlled demolition, the question that I've always got is, well, where's the proof? Well, the proof came out again in 2009 in a scientific paper published in Europe, the Open Chemicals Journal, in a peer-reviewed article written by like about 8 scientists, and they said that in every sample of debris from the World Trade Center that they studied, they found traces of the military-controlled demolition thermite, or more specifically a nanotechnology version of that called thermate. Mm-hmm. So in other words, explosive residue found in the debris of the World Trade Center. Now, just thinking as a journalist, as I was trained and educated to be, if I'm sitting on the news desk and I get a story that there is a peer-reviewed scientific paper that says they found controlled demolition explosive residue in every sample from the World Trade Center, I would think that would be news. But you hadn't heard a word, have you?
Absolutely not.
Well, I got censored out. Okay. So, so it's absolutely amazing. And then the other one that got me was that on September the 12th, 2009, an estimated 2 million Americans marched on Washington to demonstrate against the then proposed Obama health care plan, as well as the bailouts and the stimulus giveaways. 2 million people. And I've seen the photographs. I don't think that's a gross exaggeration of the number because the crowds filled the National Mall, stretched all the way down the Pennsylvania Avenue. I mean, they just fill up the whole place, and yet it got virtually no coverage. The Washington Post, New York Times carried a few little stories, and they said, well, there was several 100,000 people there. And they downplayed the number. The little small story for a day or so went away, and the rest of the country probably never even heard about it. You probably don't even know about the huge 2 million person march on Washington on September the 12th, 2009. That is control of the media. And just juxtaposition the lack of reporting on 2 million people marching on Washington for freedom and democracy, as opposed to all the coverage that Louis Farrakhan got when he had his 1 million man march on Washington.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That went on for weeks.
Yeah, I didn't even think about it that way, but yeah, when you raise that, it does. And regarding what you just said here about them asking you to, or telling you to take out the part about the media control, the media control, it's ironic too, because you hear so many critics of this sort of research saying, well, how is he allowed to write that if there's this, vast conspiracy? But then it's sort of like, as you said, that proves your point, because then they tell you to take it out of the book.
There it is. And the thing is, I'm just fortunate enough that I was able to get something published. I can't begin to tell you how many people I run across who try to get books published, articles published, and they're just simply turned down. They're not published, Well, if you don't publish it, then you can weakly, I think, argue that that's not censorship. In fact, that's what I was told. Why, preventing you from publishing something, that's not censorship. Censorship is after something's been published and you don't allow it to be distributed to anybody. Well, that's just nonsense.
Yeah, semantics.
Look in the dictionary under the definition of censorship. If you prevent something from being published, it's the same as preventing the information from being distributed. It is censorship.
Yeah, scary times.
You've got to understand that the freedom of the press belongs to the guy that owns the press.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's why we got programs like this to get the word out when the mainstream won't.
That's right. Thank goodness. And you just keep doing your good job, Tim. I'm behind you 100%.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate it. Now, since we only talk to you really on an annual basis here, I feel remiss if I didn't at least ask you about the dreaded three-letter word UFO. I know, obviously, you've researched that extensively. What's your take on the field of ufology in the last year? It seems like there's been, some interesting developments, the press conference there with the UFOs and nukes, and I feel like maybe we're in Leslie Kean's book, which seemed to get a lot of mainstream traction, so maybe we're turning a corner here, but what's your take on the developments of the last year?
Well, there's good news and bad news. First off, I'm sure you're aware of some of the more recent UFO events, like the sightings in broad daylight over New York City. There was a similar thing over El Paso, Texas. Everybody a couple of years ago heard about the sightings over Stephenville, Texas, but what they haven't heard is that that's continuing. They're still there. They're still being seen. And I think we're seeing kind of a turnaround here. The question becomes, there's something up there. Yeah. So the question is it them or is it us? If it's them, if it's ETs or visitors, non-human intelligences, wherever they come from, another time, another dimension, another star system, who knows, then this may be good because I think that we're seeing an upsurge in these sightings and a concurrent unrestrained reporting. You're getting these reports and they're not laughing and snickering like they used to. Yeah. But then again, it could be us. It could be secret test craft, and secret technology that the public is not being made aware of. In which case, that could be bad, because I know for a fact that the plans are in government files, and that, it used to be the common enemy was communism, the worldwide communism. And but when the old Soviet Union collapsed and we didn't have the communist boogaboo to beat people over the head with, then it became international terrorism. But now when that wanes and gets a little thin, apparently it's going to be what Ronald Reagan said, a threat from space. And as Werner von Braun said, it's all a lie. So I think we have to be very careful in it, and on either side. We don't want to say, our space brothers are here to save us. I don't think that's true. And by the same token, we don't want to go, oh, my God, aliens are here and they're going to eat us, because that's not true either.
Yeah, we got to keep an open eye on that, because who knows what that could be and what it might turn out to be. But it does feel like something's in the air, no pun intended.
I think so. Well, here's the whole thing. We're in a reverse conditioning process. You see, for about the past 60 years, the conditioning was, there's nothing there, folks. And this was a program consciously laid down by the U.S. government. It was a program of denial and ridicule. There's nothing there, and if you keep saying there is something there, then you probably need, mental help. Yeah. But now we're being conditioned the other way. Now they're reporting more seriously on sightings. We've got all these movies coming out, this, that, and the other thing. So now we're being conditioned to the idea that, hey, there is something there. And again, this could be dangerous, because this could then be setting us up for another false flag operation. And they're saying, oh, my God, there really are aliens, and they're here, and they probably want to eat you. So give us the last of your liberties, and we'll protect you. And the poor old dumbed down, long-suffering, tax-paying public will probably go for it. Oh, please, save me, save me.
Yeah, it's pretty scary, but I guess we'll see what happens.
We just have to see where it goes, but all I can say is just, hey, keep your wits about you, keep your eyes and ears open, and don't believe everything you read in the papers.
Absolutely, yeah. All right, so we've talked here in depth. We really barely scratched the surface here of the $1 trillion conspiracy. There's so much information in there. Folks should definitely check it out. And I'm sure you're already hard at work on something new and something upcoming. So what do you have coming up in the future?
Well, several things. Number one, next year will be the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, and my book on 9/11, The Terra Conspiracy, is coming out in a new, expanded, and updated version, and you want to be sure and catch that, because I'm calling it the most definitive account of 9/11 until there's a truthful investigation. That's coming up. And then in another couple of years, you might even see a new edition of Crossfire coming out.
Oh, wow.
Go back and revisit the Kennedy assassination, bring it up to date. And that's going to be real interesting because, for so many years, by the way, just to show you, since I lived through all this, for about 15 years, Tim, after the Kennedy assassination, it was just considered impolite to even bring up the subject in polite company. Okay?
Yeah, it was kind of like that with 9/11 too afterwards.
And that's it. That's my point. We're going through that same period with 9/11, but hopefully the time frame will be a little bit shortened, and I think in a few more years you're going to see more and more information coming about 9/11 that will show you that it was definitely an inside job, okay? Because number one, what can absolutely be proven is that there were numerous nations and organizations and intelligence operatives trying to warn us what was going to happen, and yet nothing was done. So at the very best light you can put on it is they knew it was going to happen. They allowed it to happen to further their agenda. But then when you start looking even deeper and find the close connection between the Saudis and the hijackers and Osama bin Laden, most of whom were Saudis, the fact that even the 9/11 Commission said that it was Saudi charity money that was going to fund Al-Qaeda, when you look into the background of Al-Qaeda and found out that it was actually created by the CIA, and of course, if you've ever seen the spy movies, no one ever quits the CIA. You're always there. So, it even gets darker, and it begins to look like they could have even actually caused the whole thing. So, but that, I don't know, people don't want to hear that, and they're in denial right now, just like they were for 15 years after the Kennedy assassination. So it may be a few more years before all that starts breaking out and people start accepting the fact that they were snookered once again.
Yeah, I think it's because people just. Not people like you and I who are hip to the score of what's going on, but the average person, I think it terrifies them more than the actual idea of terrorists. It terrifies them to think that that's what the world really is.
That's true. And that's why they just place themselves in a situation of denial. It's just, I don't hear that. I don't hear about that. I don't know about that. And, I believe the government, although I can't quite understand why anybody would say that, because, if the federal government of the United States was an individual, neither you and I or anybody I know would have anything to do with them, because they have been proven to be a liar.
Absolutely.
Time after time. And, fool me once, that line. If you lie to me once, I can be pretty forgiving, and I can write that off as a mistake or maybe a misunderstanding. You lie to me twice, I start really raising my eyebrows. You lie to me 3 times, that's it. I don't want anything to do with you.
Exactly. Absolutely. All right. So a reissue of the Terror Conspiracy next year with new information, and then a little bit further down the line, a reissue of Crossfire with some new information in it, I'm sure, as well, right?
Right. Plus all kinds of goodies in between, probably.
Sounds good. Well, keep an eye out for that, folks, at jimmars.com, JIMMARRS.com. Well, Jim, it's been once again an awesome conversation with you here to kick off another season of BOA Audio. I loved the $1 trillion conspiracy. Even though it's terrified me in a lot of ways, it also gave me hope that maybe we can find some ways to change things as well, and certainly educated me as to what's been really going on over the last couple of years. A lot of stories that I hadn't heard of, or developments that I did not know about are in the book. So folks should definitely go out and check that out. As I said, if not for you, there would be no BOA Audio. There would be no Banal of America. You lit the fuse that started this whole franchise. So that's why we always pay homage to you and have you on here to kick off each season of the show. It's been a pleasure once again, Jim.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. Again, good luck to you. And remember my motto, none of us are as smart as all of us.
There you go.
That does it for the season premiere of BOA Audio Season 6. Want to give huge thanks to the venerable Jim Mars for joining us once again to kick off yet another year of BOA Audio. He is truly a legend and someone that I am proud to call a friend. You can find out more from Jim, of course, at his website, www.jimmars.com, JIMMARRS.com. And the new book that we just spent the last hour plus talking about is The $1 Trillion Conspiracy, How the New World Order, Man-Made Diseases, and Zombie Banks Are Destroying America. Check it out. Moving right along now, since it is the first episode of the new season, we're going to eschew the normal BOA Audio listener feedback. Let me give a little feedback to all you guys. I tried to avoid the histrionics at the beginning of the episode. I am prone to hyperbole, so I didn't want to overdo it as we were kicking off another year of BOA Audio, but I am quite simply thrilled to be back and bringing you a whole bunch of new BOA Audio episodes over the next few weeks and months. It is going to be an awesome ride, folks. I have already taped a whole bunch of really thought-provoking interviews and fun interviews that I think you are going to really dig, and I hope all the great folks out there, of course, the hardcore listeners have already found us, I'm sure. I hope the casual listeners have realized that we're back as well, but they'll come along as we keep going. This ain't a one-and-done deal, friends. We've got a ton of good stuff lined up for you, believe me. Thank you for coming back, and thanks for coming back for another year of shows and for another wild ride. You guys are the best. If you want to reach me to be featured in a future edition of BOA Audio Listener Feedback, let me give you the methods. Of course, you can simply go to banalofamerica.com, BINNALL of America.com. Click the contact button. That'll show you how to reach me, or just write to boaaudio@hotmail.com. And the final main method is to join up at the official BOA forum, the US of E.com, THEUSOFE.com. We like to call it BOA's Paranormal Playground. A little bit more interactive, of course. It is the forum for Banal of America. Check it out and join in on the fun. And we're also on Twitter, Facebook, and MySpace. So befriend me, follow me, and poke me, folks. I'd love to hear from you on one of those sites as well. Those are the methods. Send me your correspondence. Let me know what you think of the season premiere. Let me know what you think of the new episodes as they come at you over the next few weeks. Let me know who you want to see on BOA Audio Season 6. There's still a wealth of spots left. This is only episode 1 out of about 33 or 34 shows. So we've got a whole lot of ground left to cover and a whole lot of openings for potential guests to be on the program. I've been looking at your guest suggestions from the end of last season. Don't worry, folks. The wheels are in motion on some of those names that you floated my way, and thank you for your contributions to the zeitgeist that is BOA Audio. Up next, let's do the thanks segment. Allow me to tip my cap and thank the outstanding BOA staff: Leslie, Chiron, Regan Lee, Joe V, Tina Senna, Rochelle Hawks, Richard Thomas, Marla Pena, our contributing cartoonist, Andy Carolin, and our webmaster, Jeremy Boston. Check out all the great columns from the BOA staff at Banal of America. Lots of fascinating reading material for you to sink your teeth into as you wait for the next edition of BOA Audio. We say it week in and week out here at the end of the program, but it is true. The BOA staff is doing some amazing work, and if you're not reading the columns at Banal of America, then you're only getting half of the story. BOA, make it a part of your everyday search for esoteric news and opinion. Normally, the next segment here at the end of the show is me essentially begging you all for donations, but it's the first episode back. How could I possibly ask you to donate to Banal of America when we've just provided you just one episode so far this season? That would be kind of ridiculous on my part. So hold on to your money, spend it on your friends and family here for the holidays. Make a donation after episode 2 or 3 or 4. I totally understand, folks. It is the holiday season, and we've just come back. That said, of course, I've already thanked the folks who donated to BOA over the course of Season 5, and specifically when we made the big push for donations at the close of Season 5. Those folks have already listened to the season premiere because they were afforded an early premiere via our early release program. That sounds kind of illicit, but our early premiere was sent out to all the folks who made donations. So I guess what I'm trying to say is if you make a donation, chances are we're going to try and hook you up with some kind of goodies from BOA in the future. We don't want to just take your money for a job well done. We also want to give you a little thanks back, and that's what the early premiere was for all the folks who made BOA donations. For the folks who made donations and did not receive the email with the early premiere, get in touch with me because some emails bounced back, and I have a feeling that some of these emails may have slipped into the spam filter of some people's email account, because I got an email from somebody that said I didn't email them, and I looked, and there it was in my sent folder. So I don't know what's going on with that. So hopefully the vast majority of people who made donations got their ears fed with the early premiere, and thanks once again to them for making donations. Finally, let's preview next week's edition of the program. I already gave just a blistering preview of this one on the donors edition of the program, so I think I may just cut that and paste it in here because I don't know if I could do the preview justice here a second time around. Our guest is going to be previous BOA audio guest Gian Cassar, but unlike his previous appearance when he talked about the Bermuda Triangle, this time around he's going to be talking about the Sasquatch phenomena. And Gian Cassar has just released a new book. It's actually not even out yet, but I got myself a review copy and read it. And let me just say this right now, folks. This book is going to cause a massive firestorm in the world of cryptozoology. It's called Recasting Bigfoot, Uncovering the Truth About Sasquatch Amidst the Hype of Bigfoot. And it is, my friends, one of the most mind-blowing Bigfoot books I have ever read. It essentially rips to shreds the very fabric of what I thought I knew about Bigfoot. Gian kind of teased this at the end of our previous interview, also I think way back in Season 4. At the time I thought really, it's going to be maybe a little controversial, maybe a little off the beaten path, but it can't be that radical. Trust me, folks, it is that radical. It is amazing, and it really made me take a whole new look at the Bigfoot phenomena, which is something that I don't think I ever would have been able to have predicted even a few short weeks ago. So the book is Recasting Bigfoot. The author is Gian Cassar. You're going to be hearing me essentially agog for about 2 hours in just stunned disbelief at the information he's putting out there, the theories that he's advancing, and how radically different it is from everything I'd ever thought about with regards to Sasquatch. So this is definitely going to be a must-hear edition of BOA Audio. It's going to be one, I think, that will not only be talked about in the immediate aftermath, but will be discussed for weeks and months and probably years to come. It's that seismic of a book. Recasting Bigfoot, Gian Cassar, next week on BOA Audio Season 6. On that note, we close the book on the season premiere of BOA Audio Season 6. Once again, big thanks to Jim Mars for coming on the show and helping us to kick off another year of BOA Audio. And I would be remiss if I did not repeat it. Thank you to all you great folks out there. Thank you for picking us up again. Thank you for finding us. Thank you for waiting so long for the return of BOA Audio. Whether you donate or not, I don't want to ever create this distinction between the audiences. You're all important to me. You are all awesome. You are all the fuel that drives the BOA machine. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. This program is as much mine as it is yours, and it's great that we're all getting back together again for another year of esoteric audio. Thank you so much for making BOA Audio a part of your esoteric audio playlist. Until next week, this is Tim Banal, thanking you for listening and signing off.